Welcome back. It's been a while since we spoke like this. You could say I took a hiatus away from this channel due to life and other nitty-gritty details, but during my break, I had time to plan what exactly it is I truly want for this channel and the next steps moving forward. Now, for those of you who are consistently tapped into the channel, you would have noticed a few random uploads revolving around some indie game projects I'm currently working on with little to no information. There's a reason for that, mainly rooted in real life discussions I can't really speak on at the moment, but rest assured in due time I'll dive more deeply into those works and what's in store for them in the future. For those of you who are new here, allow me to formally introduce myself and explain my goals for the channel moving forward. I'm Delta. Professional visual development artist, storyboard artist and animator for film, comics and gaming. And since the COVID pandemic hit, I've been on the journey of indie game development with a few titles almost ready for release and others still in need of some TLC. This channel will be focusing on video game essays, devlogs of projects I'm working on and playthroughs in the near future. With that quick intro out the way, let's dive into today's topic. I pose a question to you. Should Square Enix remake more mainline entries of the series? The answer? Yes. But why? With the recent mainline entry into the franchise being Final Fantasy XVI, it's become clear that Square has lost something. This latest entry highlights Square's shift in values for the franchise. I personally believe Square should hold off on making any more mainline entries and, as seen with the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, revisit older titles to re-establish and remind themselves of the core principles that make up Final Fantasy. Now, I'm not hopping onto the hate train that many fans have boarded over Final Fantasy's shift towards more action. No, in fact, what if I told you the action elements are not the issue here? As with all fandoms, there will forever be internal wars and rarely ever be peace.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
Because as you all know, no one hates a piece of creative media more than its fans. With the case of Final Fantasy, the running debate is its gameplay style, specifically its shift from slower turn-based mechanics to an action-oriented playstyle. This has perfectly divided the fandom down in the middle, with one half, myself included, embracing the change and seeing it as a shift that was always inevitable, while others define Final Fantasy by its turn-based systems, especially in the wake of a certain game that took the world by storm. And trust me, we'll dive into that further into the video. The issue isn't that one side is correct, but rather that when one side feels a specific way about the topic, they attempt to slander those who feel differently.
You are a worthless, bitch-ass nigga. Your life literally is as valuable as a summer ant. I'm just gonna stump you. You're gonna keep coming back. I'm gonna seal up all my cracks. You're gonna keep coming back. Why? Because you keep smelling the syrup, you worthless bitch-ass nigga. You're gonna stay on my dick until you die. You serve no purpose in life. Your purpose in life is to be in my stream sucking on my dick daily. Your purpose in life is to be in that chat blowing a dick daily. Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now and give somebody else a piece of that oxygen and ozone layer that's covered up so that we can breathe inside this blue trap bubble. Because what are you here for? To worship me? Kill yourself. I mean that with 100%, with 1,000%.
You're entitled to your opinions and feelings towards a game, but being upset because others disagree with you is childish. And this is something I've seen that's rampant throughout the fandom. And yet, what if I told you you were all wrong? The fandom has convinced itself that the series' DNA is found within its combat style, specifically being turn-based, but this isn't true. So let's talk about the core principles that make up a Final Fantasy game. Let's talk about the 3 Ps of FF. What are the 3 P's of Final Fantasy? Final Fantasy is not its combat style. Final Fantasy is not its setting, whether medieval, sci-fi, or anything in between. And Final Fantasy is not its title. It's 3 core principles, 3 pillars, the 3 P's of FF: party, progression, and poetry. Let's break each one down. Party. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. A popular African proverb, one which best describes the first pillar of a Final Fantasy game, the party system. Every Final Fantasy game is made up of a group of heroes coming together under a similar cause, from heroes destined to save the planet to a group of friends on a road trip. Every game follows a band of characters coming together as they explore their respective worlds. The party is usually made up of characters of varying classes and abilities, all of whom can be switched out at a player's discretion, often prompting for strategic placements, allowing for unique party setups depending on the player's taste or for situational moments. Some games also limit players to certain characters depending on a specific story moment within the game. But the strongest aspect of the party system lies in the character-to-character interactions, the various relationships these heroes share, the banter, the love, the disagreements, and the losses. All are pivotal in making up the party system beyond its functional purposes. Progression. Progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be. A quote by the Lebanese-American poet and writer Khalil Gibran, which best describes the second pillar, the progression systems. Many believe the progression system of Final Fantasy is the ability to gain XP and level up. This is untrue. The basic foundation of leveling up through XP is a core mechanic of role-playing games. The progression systems of Final Fantasy games, however, are rooted in systems often attached to the very worlds and narratives of individual games and function alongside the inherent RPG mechanics. For better understanding, one can take a look at the most popular one, being the materia system from Final Fantasy VII. Orbs that come from the planet's life stream that carry unique abilities that enhance characters that equip them, such as being able to cast magical spells, perform unique attacks and abilities, summoning powerful creatures, or simpler functions such as strengthening character stats and equipment. The progression system needs to be tied not only to gameplay but to narrative events and/or world building. In Final Fantasy X, the sphere grid is made up of spheres that you encounter around the world, and these spheres have multiple uses, from acting as video cameras, to saving data, storing information, powering temples, and of course, powering your own characters. In Final Fantasy V, the job system allows players to pick classes that have unique abilities tied to their respective jobs, all of which stem from crystal shards from the crystals that power the very planet the story takes place in. Crystals that are shattering due to misuse, granting their heroes abilities, while also being the very thing to usher the main villain into the plot. The progression systems inform the story and/or the world building at large and are not just tools slapped in to power up the characters. They contribute to the general immersion of the story being told. And lastly, poetry. Listen and you will realize that we are made not from cells or from atoms. We are made from stories. A quote from the Mozambican writer Mia Couto. Arguably, the most important pillar within a Final Fantasy game is its ability to make you care, to make you feel. It's the poetry present within its story. If I asked you about your favorite moments from any Final Fantasy game, you'd probably list the story beats before the gameplay and mechanics. The moment Noctis lost Lunafreya. The moment Cloud lost Aerith. The moment Tidus lost his father. The ability to communicate loss to the player. The opening of Cloud on the train. The opening of Tidus shining as a star sports player. The moment Terra arrives in Nash. It's the excitement they induce with their openings. The wonder of stepping into a new and mysterious world. The choreography in fights. The thrill of a rescue mission. The epic last stand. But most of all, the silent and still emptiness when the story comes to a close, and you're left as a completely different person. The stories of Final Fantasy can be described in many ways, but one best captures the tone of every story: poetry. The stories of Final Fantasy are designed to make you feel, remind you of God's gift to humanity: emotion. So it's no wonder that the breakout release of Sandfall Interactive's Clair Obscur Expedition 33 left a lasting impression on many. It's the very epitome of poetry at play. Not only that, but it fulfills the other two pillars present here. It was the Final Fantasy game fans longed for. But note that its gameplay isn't what gives it the DNA of a Final Fantasy title. Based on these pillars, we can sift out which games follow the 3 P's of FF, and you might think it's all of them. But 16 lacks both the party and progression, with its brilliant story being the only aspect that feels like a Final Fantasy game. Shockingly enough, Final Fantasy VIII lacks the progression needed to truly feel like a Final Fantasy game. Its junction system created a paradox within its foundational RPG mechanics, making it in conflict with itself. 15 had a party that couldn't be used until later through DLC season updates, feeling incomplete to those who bought the vanilla version upon release. These 3 pillars can even be extended to games that aren't Final Fantasy, such as the aforementioned Clair Obscur, boasting an amazing cast of characters whose relationship with one another left you either laughing.
To what do we owe the pleasure of your company?
We're heading for Old Lumiere.
Okay, bye.
Or crying. Its progression system was not only functional but served narrative purposes, as seen with Gustav's skill tree and even Mael's endgame abilities. And the poetry, need I say more, really? Chrono Trigger is a Final Fantasy game, with its cast of characters that span multiple time periods, all interacting with one another against a common foe that plagues their respective timelines. Its progression system through magic gained from visiting Specchio, which also ties into the narrative beats of the Dark Ages timeline within the game, to the double text and triple tech abilities that showcase character synergy, thereby telling its own story of character relationships through their shared abilities, and its story echoes through multiple generations. Pun intended. Chrono Trigger's story is one that gamers cherish and view as a timeless tale of time. And though many might argue against this one, but God of War Ragnarok is a Final Fantasy game.
What?
Stay with me now, I'll explain. A party of people are present, all of whom are actively given commands to. Even Mimir can be made to attack with the Red Relic equipped, whose interaction with one another is arguably the best part of the newer God of War games. Its progression system is so FF coded that it's more of an RPG game than Final Fantasy XVI is, with various equipment that can be changed and upgraded at will to encourage player expression through runic attacks that stem from the world itself, to empower not only Kratos but his allies as well. And its poetry,
why? And that was running.
And so are we.
I don't understand.
When an animal is wounded, it must stop the bleeding, or it will die. We have been wounded, and this is a distraction.
do I even have to say much on this? But what if I told you that Expedition 33's success has a more detrimental effect on not only Final Fantasy but the gaming industry at large? Let's talk about the Subway Surfer effect. Now I want to make this clear. Expedition 33 is an amazing game and I'm a huge fan, so I don't want people to be confused when I call its success dangerous. But there are some things we need to talk about regarding this game, and it has to do with Subway Surfers. Remember when Subway Surfers dropped? It was the golden age of mobile games. Fruit Ninja, Candy Crush, Vector, Flappy Bird, and so much more. But what followed the success of these titles was a sea of imitations, all made for the purposes of monetizing your love of these respective titles, and failing to do so, thus merely acting as marketing for the games they ripped off, sending you back to the game they attempted to mimic. I call this the Subway Surfer effect. But what does it have to do with Expedition 33? Do you want to know why the imitations of all these mobile games actively failed? Because none of them was made with clear intent. No love, no passion. This wasn't influence, it was mimicry. Expedition 33 took the traits of the games it was influenced by, built on them, and evolved them till it became something completely new. It wasn't another Final Fantasy nor Persona. It was a game inspired by those titles, becoming its very own IP, and it wears its influences proudly, because it was made by people who wanted to make this sort of game. They were not told or forced into this. Fans are actively demanding that Square Enix make Final Fantasy turn-based again, yet no one seems to be asking a simple question. Does the Final Fantasy team want to make a turn-based game? As an artist, one thing I and many in the creative industry can agree on is that the only thing worse than a greedy CEO is the lack of creative control on a project. Stripping a team of the ability to make art the way that they envisioned because of what's trending is creative suicide. Trends, market data, and the usual business approaches don't work well in the creative industry and often lead to the Subway Surfer effect. Because art isn't like other products. It's subjective by nature. You won't know what the customer wants until it's in their hands. So naturally, risk-taking becomes the norm of the industry. Demanding more turn-based games won't result in more Expedition 33s. It only results in a sea of imitations and a desperation to chase a trend instead of a creative vision that everyone on the team agrees with. We've recently seen a wave of online hero shooters and live service games flooding the market due to this very reason. One studio makes something that's really successful, and everyone else believes that it's the genre and not the team's passion and creative vision that led to the success. So what follows are imitations that make the entire genre stale, even for games that could have been good. EA's Joseph Fares tried highlighting this, and many mocked him for it, seeing it as an attack on Expedition 33, when in reality he was warning developers to simply make the game they want to make.
The most important is that not to get stuck in ideas like double A is a new thing, or indie is a new thing, or blah 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 is a new thing. We just need the diversity and respect the diversity. So I hope that publishers don't just look at, for instance, a game like Expedition, which has been a super success, as thinking, oh, double A is a new thing, let's only do that. I don't believe in that. We need diversity, because you have a huge amount of double A games that came this year that nobody even cared about. So let's remember that as well. So it's like
most AA games don't do anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's easy to get this idea, but look at this indie titles, they're doing so well. But I can tell you like 10 games are not done well.
Naoki Hamaguchi, the current director for the Remake trilogy, actually voices a great point during an interview. When asked about Expedition 33, he simply remarks that comparing them isn't the logical viewpoint, but instead states that these two games can and should coexist alongside one another, which is true. It's not about whether or not Expedition 33 is better than Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, but rather that these two games are meant to inform one another, because these two games are different in story, design, and scope. They are not rivals to one another, but siblings born of the same idea, trying to pave their own path. And yet one is actively met with disdain because the team at large wanted to try something new instead of making a one-to-one recreation. A one-to-one recreation. Let's talk about that. Just give me the same game with modern graphics and music. Don't add anything new, don't take anything out. Sound familiar? If you're in the gaming sphere around YouTube, then you've probably heard one or two content creators voice this very sentiment or something similar at least once in regards to remakes. And I could sit here and try and argue their points as to why this isn't a good idea, or I could do you one better by giving you a living case study of this very sentiment. Dead Space. The Dead Space remake did exactly what gaming fans wanted, a one-to-one recreation of the original, ultimately making the original obsolete. Why revisit a childhood game when the remake is the same thing but better? It eclipses one entirely, offering newer and old fans little to no reason to revisit the original, ultimately devaluing the copy you once owned. It wasn't a remaster, it wasn't a remake, it was a replacement. Contrast this to Capcom's approach to remaking the Resident Evil games, offering fans both new and old a faithful recreation of the original that scratches the nostalgic itch in all the right places, while allowing newer players to revisit the originals to find out what's changed and what's similar, while still allowing legacy fans to retain the value of those moments with the original. Many players argue that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy would sell more if it were a one-to-one recreation, but they actively ignore actual dominant factors such as console exclusivity as well as generational exclusivity. Fans compare the PS1 sales to now, arguing that it was an exclusive title back then, forgetting to factor in that the economy is drastically different. Inflation may have affected expenses, but inflation doesn't account for average incomes. Are people earning more than they did before? How is employment today compared to back then? More third world countries are involved in gaming than previous generations. Can they afford current gen consoles? All these factors are actively ignored in an effort to shame the devs for having exercised their creative control to craft a remake according to their vision. Hate it? No problem. The original is still as good as you remember, and it's ported to modern day hardware. Want Square Enix to return to turn-based games? No problem. Square Enix has a large library of turn-based games from old to new that fans actively turn their backs on because they like the title Final Fantasy. If you really wanted more turn-based games like Bravely Default would be best selling in their categories, but fans clearly don't show enough love to it. It's unfortunate, given that these games have great stories and great mechanics to them. But all that aside, we still haven't gotten to the crux of the issue here. Should more Final Fantasy games be remade? Yes. And should they all be remade in the same style as the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy? The answer to that may shock you. What are the pros of remaking a mainline entry to this beloved franchise? Refined storytelling, updated graphics, updated soundtracks, updated progression systems, and most important of all, updated and refined combat systems. The cons?
Look at this rubbish.
Yeah, criticism. The usual. But what is the correct way to approach a remake? The answer is simple. Both the remake and the original must inform each other, not compete against each other. They should be different enough that the original is still viable, while still being faithful enough to complement the source material it stems from. They need to exist together in harmony. So should they all be like the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy? Yes and no. Some will, others won't. Let's break all of them down. Being the first entry of the entire series, it built the foundation for the job class system, one that Koei Tecmo's Team Ninja managed to capture perfectly with fast-paced action and active job class switching during combat reminiscent of Final Fantasy X-2 through the prequel game Stranger of Paradise, which takes place before the story of FF1. Stranger of Paradise takes the foundation of a Soulslike while adding fast, engaging and stylish action that Team Ninja is known for, while blending elements of the job system to create a fun hybrid of the genre that can seamlessly blend into the world of Final Fantasy I. Final Fantasy I could use Stranger of Paradise as a foundation while building on the character swapping and party system from there. Seeing as many of the assets and environments would be ready, it would make the most sense to simply carry on with what Team Ninja has built for the prequel story and evolve it further by simply carrying it over into the first entry of the series. The second entry abandoned the job class system in favor of a more open-ended system that allowed players to customize any stat of a character depending on how much they use that particular stat. Want to deal more damage? Keep attacking. Want to upgrade defense? Guard more often. The system on paper seemed logical, but in practice felt incomplete. Yet I couldn't help but feel it was the precursor to another genre, Soulslikes. Soulslike allow players to use the world's currency, usually in the form of souls or some spendable loot dropped by enemies, to upgrade various stats to their liking. Want to have an offensive build? Dump it all into your attack-based stats. Want more magical proficiency? Drop it all into your magic associated stats. Final Fantasy II felt like it wanted to be a Souls-like in a time before it knew what a Souls-like was meant to be. Today, a remake of that game using games like Bloodborne, Elden Ring, the first Berserker Kazan, and the Lies of P as a reference point could give birth to an amazing recreation of the second entry in this beloved franchise. And who better to man Firian's story than Nipple? They released the first Berserker Kazan in 2025, becoming a cult classic to those who played the game, and if there's anyone who could help Square Enix realize Firian's battle against the Emperor, it would be the team behind the hardcore action RPG of a title that definitely deserved more love and praise. I swear I'm not biased to Soulslikes. Final Fantasy III returns to the job system first established in the first entry with improved aspects. As a stranger of paradise and the hypothetical aforementioned Final Fantasy I remake, it should follow the Team Ninja approach of active time job switching with Souls-like elements. If we follow the same design language as the city in terms of how the Onion Knight looks and functions, then I would recommend a jump button similar to Wolong Fallen Dynasty also be added to further build on the design DNA. Given the creature designs and the look of the main villains, Zonde and Cloud of Darkness, the Souls-like design philosophy will definitely shine through in a remake of this epic tale of the journey of the Onion Knight. Being the first game in the mainline series to introduce the active time battle system, I believe this specific entry should remain turn-based. I also believe it should be developed by Sandfall Interactive, given not only the story of the entry but the character-specific abilities. Cecil Harvey's plight within the tale is emotional and self-reflective, and the world the player is tasked to explore is honestly massive, boasting 3 separate worlds: the overworld, the underworld, and the lunar world. Remaking a game of this size in the style of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy with its open world aspects would take years to complete, ultimately straining budgets. An approach to how Expedition 33 was handled would definitely bring the story to life in a feasible way that's within a team scope. The main reason why I believe this title should be remade by Sandfall is more rooted in its story. Combining the minds of Square Enix Takashi Togita, Hironobu Sakaguchi, and Sandfall Interactive's lead writer Jennifer Svedberg-Yen would result in what could be the greatest fantasy story ever told. That and the idea of how they would approach the music for this entry leaves me salivating at the very idea. The 5th entry perfects the job system in the franchise, offering customization like no other. It's within the customization that I feel that Round 8 Studio should manage this project. Unlike Team Ninja's approach, fast-paced combat isn't necessarily the setting point here. It's the mixing and mashing of job class abilities. The closest system Round 8 has to this is within its weapon system in Lies of P. The ability to mix and match blades and handles was the crowning aspect of its customization, offering limitless ways to play the game. The 5th entry is the perfect place for them to replicate a similar customization experience to the job classes. I want to see Round 8 Studio push itself, and this entry would be the perfect challenge. Its story is also one of my personal favorites, with the Battle of the Big Bridge being a moment that lives rent-free in my mind. Their take on Bart and the gang against X-Death and his army would be an interesting task for the studio to undertake. Many regard 7 as the best entry in the series, but I will always believe that that title should go to 6. It's raw, visceral, and tackles themes that aren't seen in entries thereafter. It has, in my opinion, the truest idea of a villain within the entire franchise. No tragic backstory where you're meant to feel sympathetic. He's not a victim of the world. Kefka is pure evil and consistently laughs at your despair. He's power-hungry, violent, unforgiving, and most of all, desperate. Desperation is a dangerous trait in a villain, and often leads to decisions that cost lives. And boy, does he take a lot of lives in this game. Arguably the darkest and most emotional tale in the series, I have to give it to Sandfall Interactive to remake Terra's Tragedy. Not only is the world massive and its narrative daunting, but Final Fantasy VI also boasts one of the largest character rosters in the game. Remaking this in an action style wouldn't be feasible, and the best approach would be within the same vein as Expedition 33. Plus, the music. The characters all have a unique skill while also working alongside the Esper progression system. Adapting this in the Expedition 33 gameplay style will feel like a true evolution of these mechanics while still being faithful to the original's core systems. Plus, VII's fighting game inputs would blend seamlessly with Expedition 33's foundational systems. VII suplexing that train will truly be a sight to see. Also, Ben Starr needs to voice Edgar and Sabin. Some might think it should remain turn-based due to its influence on Expedition 33, but I argue otherwise due to one character alone, Squall. His gunblade reminds me of Nero's engine sword in DMC, specifically with the XIII mechanic. Squall's gameplay in the Dissidia franchise also had a very violent and action-filled feel that translated well, especially with his character. I believe Square's already established system for the VII Remake trilogy could elevate this game to the status it always deserved all those years ago. Its junction system would need a complete rework from the ground up, and I believe the more action-focused direction could help alleviate the majority of its core problems. The story always felt like a romance story between Cloud and Tifa, but in the place of Squall and Rinoa. The biggest aspect that will benefit from a remake will be the character interactions. If done in the same style as the VII Remake trilogy and God of War Ragnarok, you could end up with characters that truly feel realized like never before. The aspects that should be revised, however, are definitely the open world system from the VII Remake trilogy. The most feasible method would either to be maintaining an overworld with encounters bringing characters into an arena-like space where combat takes place, or create linear paths connecting all overworld locations, creating the illusion of an open-world overworld map. Out of all the mainline titles, I believe VIII might be the most in need of a remake. Squall's story in a world ravaged by war would be an interesting reimagining in an action style, but most importantly with a better junction system. Arguably the most cartoon-esque entry in the franchise, Final Fantasy IX would benefit from using the exact system as Kingdom Hearts. Why? I want to show you something. Here you have the original designs of Sora from Kingdom Hearts. Remind you of anyone? The general designs of this iteration of Sora were clearly pulled from Zidane. In fact, the entire cast of Final Fantasy IX could easily cross over with Kingdom Hearts, so I'm honestly surprised that a Final Fantasy IX town hasn't appeared as its own world for Sora to explore yet. The two games share such a close visual design language that a remake in the style of Kingdom Hearts feels the most appropriate. Final Fantasy IX's Tron system would also seamlessly function in a Kingdom Hearts system as a replacement for Drive Form, since both systems act the same. The entirety of Kingdom Hearts feels like a blueprint or template that Square Enix can work off of to create an impeccable remake for Final Fantasy IX. Which I wonder if the reason that they've been taking so long with announcing the mystery remake for Final Fantasy IX, as well as practically no news on Kingdom Hearts 4, is due to the two being linked in some way. Having three completely different systems that Kingdom Hearts has built, Final Fantasy IX can either simply use one as a foundation or combine the best traits of all three to work off of. Either way, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy IX clearly share the same DNA, and it's only a matter of time before one begins to draw influence from the other. This has to stay turn-based. Not only that, it should be made by Sandfall Interactive for several reasons, but mainly because the most standout inspiration came from Expedition 33 was Final Fantasy X's conditional turn-based system. Unlike older ATB systems, the CTB system pauses time entirely when it's a player's turn. A turn order list on the screen shows exactly when characters and enemies will act and how specific commands, example like strong spells, guarding, will shift the upcoming order. The same system was implemented in Expedition 33 and it's one of the game's clear love letters to the Final Fantasy franchise. The overdrives from Final Fantasy X are also clearly broken up into various quick-time events during Expedition 33 fights through dodging, parrying, and various other attacks and abilities. Central Interactive have managed to evolve what Final Fantasy X CTB system was, and I'd be most curious to see how they'd use what they've made with Expedition 33 and implement it back into Final Fantasy X, while also reimagining the sphere grid as well as mini games like Blitzball. Their take on character dynamics would be my most anticipated aspect of this remake. How would they approach Wakka's discrimination against the Albert tribe? How would they approach Sin and the religion of Yevon? But most of all, how would they approach Tidus and Yuna's relationship leading up to their tragic separation? My favorite entry in the entire franchise and the reason why I entered the creative industry and sought to be a game designer. I'd love to see the team behind Expedition 33 bring the tragic love story of Final Fantasy X to life again. As an MMORPG, I'll be skipping this one. Being the most experimental entry in the franchise, I believe a remake should maintain the experimental identity and try something different from all the rest. I believe a remake in the same style as God of War's latest Norse saga is the best approach for various reasons. Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system allowed customization of various ally actions, and I believe fusing that with God of War's companion synergy system would create an evolved Gambit system that may lead to the best party customization system in the franchise. Given the weapons of Final Fantasy XII, I also believe that God of War's over-the-shoulder camera style will benefit characters who use ranged weapons, allowing for seamless transition for aiming while still maintaining close-quarter combat. Think Atreus. The license board went through various changes between the original and Zodiac versions, but I believe a system that combines the two should be present. In God of War, Kratos can switch between weapons. A similar system in Final Fantasy XII Remake can take place, where characters can switch between two weapons, each representing the associated class, or unequip their weapon, allowing the character's base class to be used. The main reason I believe Santa Monica should be the developer behind a remake of this specific entry is because of the cultural, historical, and architectural influences. Santa Monica would be able to bring a better and closer interpretation of these influences, not only in the world design, but most importantly in the characters. My biggest quarrel with this game was that it was too, and forgive me if I offend any Western and European people, but it was too white. The Arcadian Empire made sense, given that it was clearly inspired by Roman and Western sources. However, many of the game's influences drawn from Arabia, India, and West Africa, yet none of its characters seem to highlight that. Vaughn, Penelo, and Ash are characters from Dalmasca, a kingdom inspired by our real-world Damascus, a city in Syria. Not only that, the kingdom of Dalmasca is situated in the middle of the desert, meaning its people would most likely be dark-skinned or tanned in complexion, yet these three characters appear white or Asian passing. A necessary change that I believe Santa Monica would correct, while also maintaining the core attributes of these characters. The core narrative themes also revolve around war, colonialism, personal loss, and the desire for freedom, which Santa Monica Studios no stranger to. Revisiting Final Fantasy XIII led me to believe that this was the prototype or blueprint for what would eventually become the combat style for the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. The game wanted to frame its combat similar to a character action game without sacrificing its turn-based elements, which led to a strange hybrid that starts relatively well, but the more abilities you earn and further down the story you progress, the system begins to fall apart, especially with its auto battle function and most especially with a Dolan summons turning the game into an arena fighter. Naoki Hamaguchi did reveal in an interview that the younger staff at Square Enix had a particular liking for Final Fantasy XIII, so I wouldn't be shocked if we see a re-release for consoles, or better yet, a similar approach to Crisis Core. Final Fantasy XIII still holds up visually, but its combat needs rework. I wouldn't be surprised if a soft remake in the vein of Crisis Core took place, where the original game's bones are still used and simply transplanted into the 7 Remake trilogy's battle system and updating smaller things such as music and voice acting. Square should take a page out of From Software's approach to training younger staff through already completed assets, as seen with Elden Ring Night Rain. A similar methodology can be followed with Square's younger staff through Final Fantasy XIII. Seeing as it's their favorite among the newer employees, they can produce a soft remake of the 13 trilogy using the already established models and assets. Again, seeing as it's an MMORPG, I'll be skipping this one. There's only one way to truly remake this game, by returning to the original Versus 13 concept, with the original Kingdom Hearts inspired gameplay and darker thematic elements that it was meant to carry. I'm aware that many enjoyed what Final Fantasy XV ultimately became, but having been one of the people who followed this game's development journey since the beginning, I never truly got over the portrayal of what could have been. So instead of a remake of 15, I propose that Square simply create an alternate timeline and bring back the concept that Tetsuya Nomura envisioned with updated visuals. There isn't much I can say here, to be honest. What Versus 13 was promised to be is exactly the remake we need here. And if this is your first time ever hearing about Final Fantasy Versus 13, I highly suggest you go down the rabbit hole of its development and witness firsthand what Noctis' story could have been. It's tragic, but it always lives in the hearts of those who witnessed it in its initial inception. This one's peculiar, seeing as how it was recently released, so instead of a remake, it simply needs an update, or better yet, its own trilogy or sequel at the very least, with an emphasis on adding a party system with character switching and a better progression system. I honestly want to make a separate video on this game because it's an interesting case study and a game that many fans unfairly criticized. Is it a Final Fantasy game? Personally, no. I don't think it should have been called Final Fantasy. But is it a bad game? Hell no. This game is amazing, and I believe the one aspect that led to its downfall was, honestly, its title. The legacy it was meant to live up to was weaponized against it. But as I said, a video for another time. Remakes are viewed badly by many gamers nowadays, arguing that studios aren't making any new games, but I present a counter argument. Are the studios we all grew up with the same developers we once knew? Do they still carry the same values and principles? And do these principles reflect accordingly through their work? In a sea of live service slop and microtransactions, I believe remakes are a necessary evil for many studios to remind themselves just who they are. What were the defining core pillars of the companies that we grew up loving? What made Naughty Dog, Naughty Dog? What made EA, EA? What made Square Enix, Square Enix? The answer lies in their library of forgotten IPs. And only through a remake can they truly come to an answer behind what's missing. So before you criticize Square for what Cloud's story has become, how about we let Square reach the finish line and actually finish the trilogy? Whether good or bad, there are answers in this trilogy that will help shape the future of their games. But these are simply my opinions. How about you? Should Square remake more titles? Do you agree with what I've said here? Comment below. Do you disagree? Also comment below. I'd love to know how you feel about Square's future and the general future of gaming in the wake of all these remakes. And until next time, may peace be upon all of you. Thanks for watching.